Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the episode of Plugged In, where we plug you into the socket of reality. We are your hosts, Zishan and Ali, and today we have a very special guest on our show, and his name is Joel Winter. Joel Winter is a third-generation Canadian born and raised in Ontario. Though educated as a Catholic, he accepted Islam 25 years ago in his early 30s. After attending a study group in Toronto, he is now a retired teacher, having taught in both public and Islamic schools in Ontario. Joel is married and has one son. Currently, he spends part of his week with his elderly mother and has many interests such as art, music, and sports. After retiring, he began work on his new book, The Wealthy Servant. Brother Joel, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure. As you may know, we intend to kind of delve into your new book that you've written, The Wealthy Servant. But for the benefit of the audience, I believe we'd like to get to know you a little more, and especially on how earlier in your life you started off with Catholicism and you ended up with Islam. So if you can, walk us through, how that all that transpired.
Well, as you said, I grew up. My mother took us to church every Sunday. But about the time when I was 16, I started to really doubt the truth behind the Roman Catholic Church, and I didn't accept the whole idea of the Trinity. So I started to search from that time onwards to find out more about religion in general, and I studied different religions on my own. And it wasn't until I traveled to Africa in the 1980s, and I was on the east coast of Africa in Kenya when I met some Muslims there and was first introduced to Islam. And then I started to read the Quran, and then I came back and got my teacher's degree and continued to study about Islam. And eventually, I said my Shahada and became a Muslim.
That's quite interesting. In your trip in Kenya, this was in the 1980s, right? So
yes.
Was there at that time? I don't recall. Was it pretty stable back then, or was there a late turmoil going on in Kenya at that time? Or?
No, it was pretty stable back then. Yeah, and you could travel anywhere, no problem. It was really a great experience to travel there and to meet the people and also to find out about the Muslim. I had no idea there's a Muslim population along the coast there. I mean, in various parts of Kenya, I suppose there are, but there are a lot along the coast. So it was really surprising for me to find that out and to start to learn about Islam that way. Because at that time, there weren't many Muslims in Toronto or in Ontario, it seems to me, and it was difficult to find out about it now, like it is now. That is.
Yeah, I actually remember, back in the 80s, it was at one masjid, right, downtown.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was an old church they transformed into a masjid, and that was like the main masjid that everyone went to. I do remember that. And then after that, the Muslim population swelled pretty quickly.
Yeah, and when I came back from Africa, after I started to become interested in Islam, I was looking for more information, and it was very difficult to find. Like, I would look in the newspaper to see if there was any study groups or anything, and it was very difficult to find about anything. So eventually, well, I got my first teaching job in Peterborough County.
Okay.
And then I met my wife at a French course in Quebec one summer, and she's a non-Muslim, and she's still a non-Muslim to this day. But she after we got engaged, she decided that she didn't want to move to Peterborough, so I moved to Toronto. Well, that was actually worked out very well because I was able to hook up with some Muslims at the University of Toronto at a study group that they were having there every Friday. And those Muslims are still my friends today. And it was through those Muslims that I was able to take my Shahada.
Yeah, and you're talking about the analyst group, right? At that time it was called Analysts, or was it a different name back then?
Yeah, I think that's what the name of it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So sorry, this is and Joel, you know that we've known each other, but on and off for.
Mm-hmm.
But this story about Kenya, I did not know at all. So I want to go back to Kenya.
Oh, that's okay.
So
that's
when you were there, was it through people that you got some inspiration? You became interested in knowing what they practiced, or was it did you just come across some bookstore there? Like, how did that? I like to get to know a little more about that, if you can kind of expand on that.
Well, it's actually a kind of a humorous story now. I wasn't very humorous at the time, but because we met, I was traveling with my girlfriend, and we met one Muslim who was a taxi driver, and he was very charismatic, friendly, charismatic fellow. And some people can talk very well about their religion, and I'm not one of them. That's why I'm writing a book.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, he was very charismatic, easygoing, and he started talking about Islam. And then when he mentioned to me that Jesus was not the Son of God, that Jesus was a prophet, it just really struck a chord of truth in me. And I just thought that, I just knew there was something to follow up on. But as it turned out, this fellow wasn't such a good Muslim himself, because he ended up stealing my girlfriend away from me.
Well, I mean, I guess it was a good thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And that's one of the points that I'm making in my book, is that sometimes, you have blessings in disguise that you're not aware of. But that's what happened. And so I came back to Canada on my own. But it still influenced me to learn more about Islam. And, I kind of ignored the fact that, he called himself a Muslim, but I was interested in finding out about the religion.
Yeah, like, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I also, and you probably know this as well, you probably know Jeffrey Lange, who's a mathematician from the States, who also had accepted Islam. And his story, where he says, like, the way he came across it was through some nominal Muslim family who wasn't even really practicing. And I think one day he saw the Quran at their house, or he borrowed it, and that's how he was introduced to Islam. And it was a very very emotional experience he had when he started reading the Quran, right? So it's interesting.
I think if you're searching and you're trying to find something, trying to find the truth, then it doesn't matter how you're exposed to it, really.
Yeah, exactly.
As I said before I left, I was, I read the Torah, I read the Bible, I read the Bhagavad Gita, I read all kinds of books.
Yeah.
And when I was in London, England, I went to a display at the museum about Buddhism, and so I think if you're searching, it doesn't matter, how it's exposed to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Ali, got
anything? Definitely, yeah.
Ali, got anything you would like to ask Joel?
I know you pretty much covered everything. I just want to follow up on what Joel just said in the end, that if you're searching, I mean, that's absolutely true. I think you were just kind of, talking about, Toronto, Ontario back in the 80s, how there were barely any Muslims. And now we have a huge population in Toronto area, of Muslims, and pretty much whole Canada is exposed to Islam. But again, coming back to your point, if one has to be searching to be able to, for searching for the truth. And it doesn't really matter how you're exposed. You were exposed, obviously, not in a very good way, having your girlfriend stolen.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
You still kind of carried on. So I think that's a key point to take away from this.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm actually, this is a cliche question with anyone who actually embraces Islam, but I'm going to ask you anyways. I guess when you embrace Islam, how was the reaction, say, from your family and friends? How did that go?
My family's always supported me. May Allah bless them. There's never been any difficulty with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I have 5 brothers and sisters,
okay.
and they've never given me any problems or anything about it. I've lost some friends over the year, but it's a result of different social patterns. You don't feel like doing the same things as your friends do. So therefore you step outside of those social parameters, and you make new friends, basically.
Yeah, exactly, and I believe we can relate to that as well. It's also for people who've been born in a Muslim culture as well, because later on they'll become more observant, right, in practicing their Islam, and then they'll lose friends as well. So I think this is kind of universal.
Oh, I see. I never thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe I can totally relate to that as well, and I believe Ali, you can relate to that as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's funny because I grew up in New York, and I had a lot of friends in New York as well before I moved to Toronto. And then when I moved here, I had a huge social circle, and that's when I was like any other average Joe Schmo off the street, so to put it. But as Sean mentioned before, you start understanding Islam a little bit more, you start observing a little bit more, you start to lose that circle, and then because you're not on the same wavelength anymore with them, different behaviors, different things you want to be doing, different things you want to be talking about as well. So and I think you're not the only one in as I relate to Islam, kind of going through that. Even us Muslims who are lucky enough to be born as Muslims also go through the same.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, Allah closes one door, He opens another. And certainly I lost those friends, but I gained, as I said, the halaqah that I was going to 25 years ago. They're still friends today, and that's quite an achievement. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, and that's not usually the case for most people. Like in your case, you embraced Islam around over 20 years ago, and ever since then, in terms of your friends, they've kind of remained. In terms of people who, who've introduced you to Islam, or who you hang out with, in terms of having discussions on Islam. So that's not everyone has that opportunity.
And I count myself fortunate, thank God, because I feel that I've been guided in the right way. I think there's some new Muslims that get guided in many wrong ways, and they get misguided towards extremisms. Either the one end fundamentalism, or to the other end mysticism. So I think myself, I thank God that I feel I've been guided towards the middle path, basically.
In terms of ever since you've embraced Islam, I guess 25 years ago. So what do you think? And this might parallel with what you've outlined in your book, but what do you think you've gained the most ever since you've embraced Islam? Or is it more than one thing that you gained?
Well, definitely more than one thing. And I think the book that I'm writing is also a self-reflection about some of these things that I've gained. For example, when I'm talking about character traits, talking about patience, steadfastness, willpower, humility, all of these things one gains through submission to one God. So when you say that you're a Muslim, you admit that there is a greater power over everything, over your life and everyone else's life. So this is submission to God, to one God, and as a result of that, come all the other things, come all these attributes. So that's what I'm part of the genesis behind the book is to talk about these things, and I bring in anecdotal accounts from my life and from other people's lives as well.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we've kind of segued into discussing your book, The Wealthy Servant. Mm-hmm. And you've kind of touched upon the theme of the book as well. So what motivated you to write this book?
I find that there's a need for more literature about Islam directed at non-Muslims.
Yep.
In their language. I find that Muslims get used to using the same language between themselves, like they may say Alhamdulillah, Inshallah, Allah willing, that sort of thing. But I find that books need to be written to non-Muslims in a straightforward way. So this book, for example, hardly has any quotes directly from the Quran. Mm-hmm. It paraphrases the Quran, because I don't really want people to get the feel that this is a religious book, so-called religious book. I want them to get the feel that it's a life book, a book for life, basically. So, and also I don't mention the word Allah in the book. I say in the introduction that the word in Arabic for God is Allah, and so I will be using the English word throughout the book. So I'm trying to make it more to the level of a non-Muslim, more towards hopefully someone who's been exposed to Christianity, to Christian ideas, because I bring in a lot of those and make the connection between Christian ideas and Islam. So, for example, when I'm talking about Allah, the provider, instead of saying the Arabic term, which is rizq, I say, God is the provider, and I say, in God we trust. That's the name for the subsection about that is in God we trust. Well, people automatically understand that expression, in God we trust, because it's used all the time. So I'm talking about, in that section I'm talking about in God we trust, and and in many other sections, I try to use the colloquial language, basically, and try to get away from Arabic expressions and sayings that people will have a hard time with. I don't want Islam to feel foreign to people. In the section about in God we trust, I mentioned that the part from the Bible where it says, "Consider the birds." This is a famous thing from the Bible. If you even just say "consider the birds," people will understand the rest of the verse. Do you know the verse that I'm talking about?
No, if you can.
Well, I don't have it in front of me, okay. But it's basically consider the birds. They go out, they fly around, and God takes care of them. And so I make that connection from the Bible to the Quran and the Hadith. I say, well, there's the same thing in Islamic literature also as in the Bible. So I'm trying to tie into knowledge that people already have, and a lot of people have this knowledge, the Christian background that I'm trying to tie into.
No, it's a very intelligent way because in the society we live in, vast majority of the people come from a Christian background.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
This is a very great way for the purpose of inviting and conveying what Islam is all about. Because as you know, Islam is a natural way for the human being, right? Once you
and I think the problem is that people, when they think of Islam, they think of something very foreign, and that's the problem. I don't think as Muslims we're doing a very good job of making it easy and comfortable for people, because they think of Islam as people who speak Arabic, people who are from the Middle East. It's foreign. It's foreign to many people. And they don't see the similarities with their own religion.
People don't if we tell people that Islam is universal, they'll say what? Because they think it's some it's belongs to some certain tribe, and that's all it is, right? So you mentioned in your book that God is the master, and the more we realize this and put our trust in Him, the more real wealth we have. It looks like you've redefined wealth as it's usually meant. Can you elaborate more on that? What you mean by wealth in your book?
Well, I think this is what is going to hopefully get people's attention, because the title of the book is The Wealthy Servant. Well, you don't think of a servant as being wealthy.
Yep.
So it's the contradiction. So I'm hoping that will make people think that, how can you be a servant and be wealthy? Well, you're a servant because you submit to one God. If you submit to one God, you are a servant, and you are also wealthy, because you have God is providing for you. You don't, all you have to do is ensure that you live a good life, that you work hard, and God will provide for you. And also, as I indicated before, you'll develop these characteristics which will make you happier. You'll develop gratitude. You'll develop more humility, compassion for others, and you'll develop more generosity. And this is where I bring in social studies into it. And social studies tell us, for example, that the more generous you are, the happier you are. So it's not the accumulation of wealth and material goods that make you happy. It's living a good life and being generous and compassionate towards other people. And this is Islam. This is what Islam teaches us, basically.
Yeah, actually, and I just wanted to kind of just add something. We know that in almost every religion, I think in every religion, killing an innocent person is totally wrong. It's a heinous crime. Right? But imagine killing, say, your parent. That's even worse, right? And you know why it's worse? Like, why do you think it's worse to kill your parent?
Because you're supposed to respect your parents.
But exactly, and also they provided you, right? They provided you when you were, when you were a baby, when you were vulnerable. They raised you, they fed you, right? Now think of not being submitting to the one, or being thankful to the one who brought you into existence in the first place, which is your creator, right?
Yeah.
So so you cannot, if you're not in submission to the creator, who brought you in this life to begin with, who gave you something which you never had, or the life or the joys of life that you never had. You cannot be more. And if you're in submission to the Creator, then there's no one else could be more wealthier than you. I kind of look at it that way as well, right? Like you connect it that way.
Right. Yeah.
Also, you go on to say in the book that God trusts us to manage society and the Earth's resources in a competent manner. Can you elaborate on that a little more? Good.
Well, the whole idea of how we are caretakers for all the resources, we don't really own anything. God owns everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And we are, He has entrusted us with taking care of everything, and taking care of our lives, our bodies, our families, our environment, everything that we have. I give the analogy of a company, somebody who works for a company, and the owner is a really good owner and runs a really tight ship, and you really love going to work every morning. Not many places like that, I guess, but this is an analogy to the life in this world. I mean, would you wreck the property of the owner of this company? Would you do anything harmful? No, you wouldn't.
Unless you want to lose your job.
Yeah, exactly. But people don't care about that sometimes. Yeah. But no, they'd be careful, and they take care of the property, and they would be trustworthy and honest. So, that's the analogy. Basically, we need to be that way in respect to the property that God has given to us, who has entrusted with us. So, I mean, you can extrapolate from that and look at the environmental damage that humans have done, extinction of species. All of these things are great harms, which have gone against God's will, and which harm us. It's harming us, but in the long run, in the short run also, but it's also placing us against God's will, because God wants us to live in a just, equitable, and balanced world, and if we go against this and just do what we want and just bring destruction wherever we want, then it upsets the balance and creates injustice.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in the Quran it says to maintain the balance, right?
Yes, exactly.
And it's given us a duty, as representative, as a Khalifa, right? To maintain that balance, and we're given that responsibility, and we're pretty much we are failing that big time. With what's going on in the world.
In many areas, we have been failing that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that non-Muslims will an environmentalist could read that and think, oh, that's great, So we could tie into that ideal.
Yeah, exactly. What are your what's your conclusion in the book? Like, what is there, or is it pretty open, or does it, or is it just there? Is it concluding that to kind of reflect and think about, life as it is?
Yeah, I don't know. I just want the reader to make their own conclusions.
Yeah.
I just want to put out some ideas for them, some research that's been done. And I want the reader to make their own conclusions. It's not an academic book. I found books and articles that I cite but it's not a university book. I'm not a university professor. It's, as I said, contains anecdotal stories. So it's just throwing ideas out to people, and hoping, if I could have one person who could read this book and say that it influenced them to submit to one God, then he's
done his job.
It's done its job.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. Right. And and I would further qualify with what you've said, is that actually we do need more material out there, because the minority, there's a very small minority that are academics. The majority of people are not academics. So
exactly.
we need much more material out there that connects with people in a very concise and simplified way. And I do totally agree with you that we need more material like that in terms of dawah material and kind of conveying the message of Islam. And
I think if you can't speak that well, like myself, I'm not really very good. I can't think on my feet.
You've done a very good job so far.
Well, that's because I'm familiar with this material, but I don't think I've done a good job. But anyway, if you're not able to talk well, you should write. If you're not able to write, to write an essay, you should write a song. If you're not able to write a song, you should write a poem. If you're not able to write at all, then you can do something else. You can paint a picture or something. There's always ways to get the message across. But I just feel that too many Muslims are caught up in their own lives and their own communities, and their own cultures as well. And we need to be trying a bit harder, in that respect.
Yeah, like and you can't. It depends on everyone lives in a different context, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way the society is structured, it keeps us busy, right? It keeps us preoccupied, and doesn't give us time to think and reflect actually on life itself. I think there are also many people who are wasting their life. They've been blessed with say a lot of time on their hands, and they're wasting it away as well. So
that's true. That's true. And these days we have a lot more things to waste our time on, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. The way technology is used now, right? I remember growing up in the 80s. There was no smartphone or no internet. Life was much more simpler. I'm not saying that I wasn't wasting my life, but still, now you have so much more distraction that it's hard not to waste your life.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And thank God that I'm retired from teaching, and now I have the time to devote to this. So.
Yeah, exactly. Ali, you want to add anything, Ali?
Yeah, sure. You pretty much. I was going to actually ask you what kind of prompted you to start working on this project. So you already did allude to the fact that your main purpose of the book is to the target audience is essentially non-Muslims, and more specifically Christian non-Muslims. So that's good. You also mentioned in your book, that the core of your book deals with one submitting to God. Can you elaborate more on this as to how do you define submission, and by that, of course, from an Islamic perspective?
Well, I think it can be many ways that we submit to God, but it's not. I think it's understanding that to let things go in your life and not be the problem. I'm hoping that people will be attracted to this, because there are so many people that are have anxieties and have depression and mental illness, and a lot of it is related to not being able to let go and thinking that they have control over everything. And I look in the book, I look at the problem of the myth of the self-made man, for example. This is largely the American myth where people think that they can go from rags to riches and whatever they set their sights on, they can achieve. Well, that's not true. And that's more true. Social promotion in that respect is more true if you live in Scandinavia. It's much less true if you live in the United States. So you have, depending where you live, you may have less or more of a chance of achieving social promotion. But what happens when you don't? Well, then people start to blame themselves, and then they end up, maybe drinking into getting into different drugs and whatnot, getting depressed. In the first place, they don't realize that it's really ultimately out of their control, that it is in the control of one God. And that one God is beneficent in the way that maybe he has just decided that this path is not the best path for you, and that you should take another path. And I've seen that in my own life many times. I didn't end up with that girlfriend I was in Africa with. I ended up with marrying a wonderful woman. I've been married to 25 years. So you just, people are not less and less able to go with the flow in that respect. Today and yesterday I was out skiing. And these are the kinds of, we don't need to think huge fancy ideas. We just need to think on a day-to-day basis of how submission works. Yesterday I was out skiing, and my darn, I wanted to take some photographs because I paint some photographs, and my darn phone, the battery, just dropped on it, and I couldn't take any photographs. Well, if somebody really, I'm not saying that I'm the greatest person in the world. I'm just trying to make an analogy here. That if somebody did not submit to God, and that happened to them, they would get so upset. They would say, I can't take this photograph. What the heck? What's the point in being here and everything like that? No, people have to go with the flow. They have to accept things that happen to them. And, by not accepting them, they're just ending up with just anxiety and depression and so forth.
Absolutely. Also, you mentioned before as well in the interview that, you kind of delved into social sciences and you conducted research for your book as well, and also to kind of support, the word concept of submission. Was there anything in particular which came to you as a shock or perhaps news while conducting research within the realm of social sciences, which was either in conflict or in compliance with the understanding of submission? And also, if you can elaborate how it affects the society at large. I know it's a mouthful of a question, but you can take it try.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think when I first started noticing that there was this connection between Islam and the social sciences was when I read the book, The Spirit Level. The Spirit Level is about inequalities in society, and it's written by a couple of British researchers. And it's about 5 or 6 years old now. But it really clued into me the fact that, the more inequitable a country is, the more unhappiness there is among the people. A lower quality of life, and they use different ways of measuring this. For example, rates of early marriage, what's that called? Women who are giving birth out of wedlock, the amount of mental problems in the society. I can't remember all the factors, but a number of different factors, as well as income levels, the amount of education, the amount of literacy overall. So they measure these in about 30 developed countries, and they make this relationship. They find this relationship between inequality and the quality of life in these countries. And as I alluded to before, the countries with the highest social promotion are the Scandinavian countries. Well, the Scandinavian countries also are the countries that have the highest quality of life, as according to a lot of other factors as well. Mm-hmm. And then at the other end of the scale is England and the United States. Mm-hmm. So now, what is the connection to Islam, you might ask? Well, it's like, when you look at Islam, it clearly states that there should be, and it builds in systems to ensure that there is more social equality. For example, we pay zakat, which is 2.5% of our savings, is paid automatically. We have to pay that automatically to the poor and to other sources as well. So Islam, in a number of ways, stands for equality, and an Islamic country should not have citizens like the CEOs of today that are making many, many, many times more than the average worker. It's a very unjust system. And Islam is against that. So Islam is more like a social NDP type of a policy when it comes to economics.
Minus the God.
It's like the NDP for economics, but then it's like the conservatives for social conservatism. Yeah. So does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does it all make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So when we talked a lot about the book too. So when can the listeners expect the book to be released, and where can they find it?
Well, I'm not going to publish it online. I'm going to try to find a publisher for it, and if that doesn't work, I'll publish it. I'll look into self-publishing it. Okay. So we'll take it from there. When is that going to happen? I'm hoping sometime this year. Can't say when. I'm finding that it's an organic process to writing the book. Mm-hmm. So I'm exploring one area, and then that'll lead to another area, and so on and so forth.
Got it. Perfect. That's it for me. Zishan, do you have any more questions, or?
Yeah. Well, I just want to ask, Brother Joel, do you have a website where they can check to see when the book is released, or do you have a personal homepage or website that you want to share with the listeners?
No, I'm sorry, I don't have anything like that right now.
So what we could do?
I'm an older kind of guy, so I'm not so tech savvy.
Hey, that's not a good excuse. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
We're not that young here, anyways. So what you can do, Joel, is whenever the book is out, let us know, and then we can let our listeners know, where they can get the book in the event that it is out. So just keep us posted, and we'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Well, you guys have given me more motivation to continue writing. Thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. Our pleasure. Yeah. So I think that we got a minute left, I think. Is there anything else, Joel, you'd like to kind of share with the listeners, or?
In 1 minute.
Oh yeah, we'll give you 5 minutes. There you go, 5 minutes.
No, I sort of think that I've covered all the bases, hopefully, and I look forward to people being able to publish this book and for people to read it. This is the first time I've ever done this, so it's all new to me. So make dua for me, and inshallah, everything will go well.
No, for sure. No, thanks for kind of sharing your ideas and sharing, your book. I do look forward to read it myself. It seems quite interesting.
I'm glad to hear that. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brother Joel. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all the listeners, for tuning in. And till next time, be plugged in.